time, I was in a scholarship program that was based out of the Freedom House out over in Grove Hall. And it was the program was called Project Reach. So what that program did, it got 50 kids every year from all over the city of Boston, Black and Latino kids, and it was a scholarship program. It was basically a leadership program. So 2 of the kids in the program got killed within a week of each other while they were away at school. One was at a party, and one was walking home from the library. So that was the first thing I ever wrote about, was how we kind of lost these 2, people who were really committed to coming back into the community over senseless violence.
Right.
And it was after that, that was the first thing I wrote about. So there's always been a kind of a mix in my writing. It's been a mix of responsibility to community, but it's also been the stuff about the the fun and the journalism and the entertainment side of it. So that's why when you look at Killer Boombox, we don't really kind of do it like Shade Room and and Hollywood Unlocked and all those places do. Like
real
there's plenty of there are plenty of places that do that, and it's cool. There's I think there's a place for everybody to do their thing. For us, we just like to approach it a little bit more serious. But excuse me, and not to be corny or stale or whatever, but we wanna give the art and the culture that we love the weight that it deserves. Mm-hmm. We want to analyze and have discussions about it and have fun at the same time. So we try to put all those things together. So we that's been something that my partner and I have 2 partners. I have 1 partner. I'm sorry. There's 2 partners in the company. No, there's 2 partners in the company.
That's why he's trying to poach Shirley.
No, Shirley is a wonderful young lady. This is probably the most thorough interaction I've had with any other media outlet. So when Shirley comes over, y'all are welcome to visit. I'm sure, and you'll see how hospitable she is.
We can talk about partnership. You ain't stealing Shirley, man. Because honestly,
we can't work together as black people. That's how it is.
I'm more than willing to work together.
But you want to take our talent?
Working with Shirley.
No, but even just listen to you saying what you just said, it sounds what we sat down and when we started the Urban Collective show, that is exactly what we did. We could have went the whole media route that everybody's doing. I mean, we talk about it, we'll glance on it, but we want to make sure that the culture is being pushed forward. And this is why we bring on celebrities like yourself.
Right.
But tell us about, in your writing, what has been one of your best pieces and one of your worst pieces? Because I know in journalism, for me, not every story I want to talk about. For you, do you pick and choose what you write on, or do you have to write on certain things even though you don't care about it?
It's funny with entertainment news and music journalism. It's kind of similar to sports journalism. This is the only These are the only areas where you can have favorites. If you're a sports journalist, you can say you're a Red Sox fan. I can say I'm a Jay-Z fan. I can do all those things within that realm. So in terms of the positive experiences and the negative experiences, it usually boils down to like the interaction with whoever it is that I'm interviewing. Okay. But I can write about we write about whatever we want. I think the thing that we do and that we try to instill in all the stuff that we do is just the way that we talk about it. Like, for example, there's a way to have a conversation about, everything that Kanye is talking about or the things that he's been saying, and where you make him, it's about the Kardashians and all this other stuff. And there's a conversation where you can have really, in-depth conversations around what he's saying and what the effect of an incredibly famous person is. Like, you can troll, but he's trolling in I feel like it's weird. I'm kind of torn. Part of me believes that he's legitimately on a quest for information, right? But then at the same time, dog, your mom was a college professor and your father was a Black Panther. So don't tell me you don't know what is going on. I listen. I know you got that information in there, so stop playing. Right. And you did it in Chicago, where there's a level of seriousness around Black issues in America that it just is not a game. So don't play like that, because there's people who are legitimately in situations where they can't go to the confines of this beautiful place in Calabasas and just not see nothing, have marble walls, and there's a whole bunch of people that you're paying that everybody loves you and you're insulated. Like, we're all out here in the real world, And when you say that, when you light that fire and you tell people you love this guy, if you're saying I love him because I love all human beings and we got to figure out a way to work together, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. But if you're saying I love this guy and you're not explaining what that means,
Right, what that looks like.
especially in a space where they're trying to take every piece of information that's positive to show that there's black people that are behind him, no, you either don't care about us or you're not smart enough to see that you can be used as a pawn.
Yeah.
So talk.
So speaking.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I was like, so talk more about that though. Like, I mean, so one of the things that I'm hearing you talk about is when you have an artist at the forefront and they're saying things that are very controversial. And how does one listen to a controversial artist and still pick out like the truths of what they're trying to say and like real solid information, or how do we back them up or kind of say, hey, you know what, I don't support that person based off of knowing some facts. So as a journalist whose job is to report and to, I'd say as a journalist's role, like you also can manipulate how one thinks, right, and what one could take away from information that is shared. That's what you're writing. That's what you're telling people, like whether you're sharing facts or an opinion. So how do you navigate in spaces? How do you write something and pick a side when there's a lot of controversy there?
I mean, if in journalism, you're not really supposed to pick a side.
Right.
So
Right.
you're really supposed to kind of display the sides.
Right.
We're almost like the refs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So here it is. Here's the information. You guys figure it out. You tell me. You figure out what you think it is. The whole idea is for us to get all the information and put it together. And I think we live in an era where there's a big difference between broadcasters and personalities and journalists. Like
Yes.
Charlemagne is a great personality, he's a great broadcaster, but he's not necessarily a great journalist.
Okay.
And when you're a journalist, you're going to give a little bit more pushback than he did in that interview with Kanye. Like if that interview's completely different if he sits down with Elliot Wilson.
Oh,
The
yeah, of
interview's
course.
completely different if he sits down with Dream Hampton, who's like one of my favorite writers. Like, so there's a completely different responsibility and even thought process. You know what I mean? There's a reason why people why people love to kind of create their own media situations so that they can go in places where no one's going to press them and ask them hard questions. You know what I mean? So to answer your question around the whole idea of how do you kind of strike that balance, the whole idea is to come to it and strike a balance. Now, yes, people say that, like I said, journalists are supposed to be balanced, but that's not necessarily the case. So it's about who you are, like who you bring to the table and kind of what are the values that you have. Like, it's important for me to kind of to make sure that we're telling the story of Black and Latino folks. Like, that's important to me. And especially when we're talking about the music that kind of birthed the culture that we're in now. That's all coming from that space. It's all black and brown. It's all black and brown people, and we can talk about the good and the bad. I don't think there's anything wrong with. I'm not trying to paint a picture where we're always talking about, this person's been giving out flowers and turkeys or whatever. Like, we're not all. Let's not try to paint it. Let's have real conversations. Let's have a conversation about R. Kelly. Like, I've been telling people he needed to be out of here. Y'all just caught up. Like, he's been supposed to be gone.
Yeah.
Talking about that, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, you were talking about Dream Hampton's one of your favorite writers. Growing up, what were some articles or magazines that influenced you and that made you fall in love with writing?
Wow, you know what? So when I was in high school, this is even well before for the whole college thing. When I was in high school and middle school, what I used to do with my money, I used to get on the train. I live in Fields Corner. I used to live in Fields Corner. Walk down to the train station, get on the train, ride all the way out to Cambridge, go to Out of Town News, and I would get this magazine called Touch Magazine, which is a English version. It's basically like an English version of Vibe magazine.
Okay.
I would get Vibe magazine because I thought that was incredible. Like, Vibe was like, when it first dropped, was really like.
These are some good pieces.
It was like Rolling Stone, but from our perspective.
Yes.
So it was those two, The Source. The Source is
Yeah,
incredible, and that's where I fell in love with Dream and her writing.
Gotcha.
So those were places those were magazines that were dope, and the reason they were dope is because up until then, the only time you got music journalism was like Spin, Rolling Stone, and stuff like that. So when you had those papers and magazines decide that they wanted to cover urban stuff, then that's when you got to get that kind of journalism done on it.
Yeah.
But you know, so that was when you got it. But in terms of the black magazines, you had like Right On. It was real fans based stuff. So it was like, you know, Win a Date with Bobby Brown and stuff, that kind of stuff. And I had no interest in a date with Bobby Brown. You know what I mean? I wanted to know why, you know, how those Public Enemy records were constructed. I was always like, I wanted to know the behind the scenes stuff. Like we were just talking. I was talking to my new friend Shirley, and I was telling her about one of my favorite podcasts right now is a podcast. Yo, my man, it's tight as a drum, though. It's all good. You can come over and visit. We got air conditioning killer boombox, Shirley. That alone is my. I'm just saying.
Okay.
But no, what else? You can come too, because y'all
cut the cameras, cut the mics, interviews over. This man came here on other agendas.
Yeah, here you go. But what I say is, there's a podcast that I listen to all the time called Something to Wrestle With, is with a guy by the name of Bruce Pritchard, and he used to be a producer for WWE. So he was behind the scenes during the era of The Undertaker and Stone Cold, and they talk on the, yeah, exactly, all that. So he on his podcast once a week, he'll talk for almost 3 hours, breaking down the behind the scenes of how this person got into business and all that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that I've always been fascinated with. So when I was in high school, when I would go out to Harvard Square, I would get like New Music Express. These are all English music magazines. I would get, you know, Hip Hop Connection, which was the first English hip hop magazine. So I would get those magazines just to get more information about the stuff that I like. So that's always been my thing, to really kind of come to it from that perspective.
What do you read and who do you follow now to keep you relevant and keep you current?
I mean, it's funny. There's a couple of people. You know, Chris Ferrone, who's the editor of the Weekly Dig, which is a newspaper that we have a partnership with. That's here in Boston. So the pieces that we've been doing, like I'm actually, he's my friend, but I'm also a fan of his. Gotcha. In terms of his writing, he's one of my favorite writers. I still read Dream, but she's actually moved on to doing film. Yeah, so all the writers that I really fell in love with in early music journalism are all doing bigger pieces now. They're moved into other realms of creativity. So Eric Parker he did the Nas documentary for Illmatic.
Oh, that was a great documentary.
He was that guy. Started off as a music journalist. Okay. What is it? Rapture was, I want to say it was Mimi Valdez, who used to be a former editor of Vibe. Okay. So everybody's moving into those documentary spaces, which is kind of the same lane of where we're going to. So I keep up with those pieces. So now, instead of just reading, I'm reading, watching, and listening. Yeah.
So talking about that, you said that's where you might want to go to with the documentaries. Definitely. Would you just want to stay in that field, or would you still want to keep the magazine aspect and still reporting and everything and do that on top of it?
No, the whole idea is to do all of it. And with the thought process that people want to hear stories, they want to take stories in a variety of different ways. You know, a lot of times you hear the problem with the newspapers, and you'll hear newspaper people say, you know, no one wants to read newspapers anymore, and the newspaper industry is dying. It's not dying, it just needs to evolve. Yes. People don't necessarily want to read their news on a large piece of wood that they got to carry with them on the train. Right. Some people want to ride on the train in the morning and watch a 5-minute clip on a video. Some people want to listen to a podcast. So there's a variety of ways that you can get that same information with that same level of integrity. You just got to understand how to tell stories today. So that's what we're kind of charged with now, and where we're pushing our company forward in 2018 and beyond.
So are you guys looking to expand and hire more people, bring in more writers? Or
absolutely.
Do you just want to keep it?
Absolutely, and we're definitely going to expand.
Okay.
Why you look at me on
I'm trying to expand, okay.
I'm looking over there like you and Shirley can call. Come on together.
You know?
Both of y'all updating y'all contracts.
Come on, man. Exactly. You won't be under that pressure over there.
Okay.
I'm saying, your cute scarf, and come on over.
Okay.
No, but yeah, we definitely are looking to get more people involved in, and we're actually.
In what aspects also?
Well, it just all across the board. Like it's time for our company to grow. So we've been fortunate enough to apply and be a part of incubator programs. So there's a lot of startup incubator programs here in the Boston area. We've actually gone through 2 of them. The second one that we did was Smarter in the City, which was the first tech incubator program in Roxbury. Before that, we were in Accelerate Boston, which was an accelerator for creative businesses. So now we're in the process of going out and raising funding, doing a first round of raise to take our company to the next level. So we're still small. We're still kind of bootstrapping it and kind of getting it going ourselves, but we're actually working to kind of just move to that next level. It's difficult in Boston because in Boston, in the startup world, a lot of the plays are tech, and a lot of them are healthcare. Exactly. So it's a little bit more difficult to kind of break through and explain to somebody, like, yeah, I'm really going to explain why Kanye is acting like that, and that's going to be our business model. Like, it's going to be part. We're going to be a place where you can find
10 million
out
people doing that already.
Right, and I got to give you $15 million.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a matter of kind of figuring out how to tap and get more people to get involved. And a lot of it has also been us looking outside of Boston in terms of where that funding may come from. So that's where we want to go long term.
So with that, we always ask artists that because a lot of our people come from, a lot of our guests are from Boston. Do you feel as though Boston stands behind what you're trying to accomplish? Because you said now you got to expand outside of Boston. I know it's because we're more tech and health industry heavy, but can you honestly stay in Boston and continue to grow without having to go outside, or do you feel as though you have to go outside?
Oh no, I don't necessarily. There's aspects of what we do that are going to require us to leave the city. Like the entire music industry is really in 3 places. It's in Atlanta, exactly, New York, Atlanta, and LA. And really, when you're talking about the media side of it, it's really New York and LA. Because if you think about it, whenever somebody's putting out an album, they go to New York, they stay for a week, and they're on every media platform that they need to be. And you'll see them pop up on the radio, they'll pop up on every magazine, because they know I can fly into this one city, stay here for a week, talk to everybody I need to, and then boom, I can get out. I go to LA, stay there for another week, that's 2 weeks, I'm done. I've talked to every major outlet in the world. And if I really want, and depending on if you're a Rihanna or whatever, you can go fly to London and you can take care of Europe. Those are 3 cities you need to go to, and that's it. We're not at that space yet. It's not economically feasible for us to expect that the music industry is just going to come see us. So we would currently be in a position where we would almost be a part of the run when they come into the market. So now, right now, if someone comes to the market, they go to Jammin', they may go to Hot, or, they may go to 97.7 depending on the artist, and then they're out of here. Our initial goal is to build ourselves up so that we're in that space, and then, like you said, like we can't necessarily stay here. It's just not the smart business model. But what is beautiful about now is that the world is flat because of the internet. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do, and there's a lot of things that we can still keep based here. So I could keep the company based here and just have people operating for me in New York. It doesn't necessarily have to be a situation where we have to move there right away.
Satellite base in New York, essentially.
We can be a satellite in New York until the time comes where it makes it, business-wise.
Okay. So far out of the interviews you've done, do you have a favorite person? And then, of course, we got to ask the other side of that. Who's been your worst person or least favorite?
Let's just keep it positive. I don't want Shirley thinking negative. My favorite interview probably was Questlove.
Okay.
So I interviewed Questlove years ago, and I interviewed him, and I talked to him for about an hour and a half. I was writing for the Metro. So the Metro newspaper?
Yes.
So the Metro is based here. It's actually an international newspaper, but there's 3 editions in the United States, and then there's like 30 editions around the world. Like there's 4 in Canada and wherever else. So I was interviewing him for the Metro for a date that he was coming up here, and we were supposed to talk for like 20 minutes. We ended up talking for an hour and a half. Me and this dude talked about everything. Like he explained to me why he would never write like the book that I wanted him to write, or you know, because he's writing books now. He's on the second book. His book now. I can't remember the name. It's like Creative Quest or something like that. It's actually a New York Times bestseller this week. But at the time, he had just signed his book deal, and on I don't know if you guys know his website, OK Player.
Yes.
So on OK Player, there used to be a stream in the forums where people would put up a famous person's name, and he would tell a story about that person.
Yes,
And I was like, you remember? So
Yeah.
I was asking like, why don't you write that as a book? He's like, there's no way in the world I can tell that story. So me and him talk. Like I said, we were supposed to talk for 15 minutes. We ended up talking for an hour and a half. He's the only person that I ever said, okay, man, I got to get off the phone.
Okay. Wow. That's real good.
Then I had another interview with a rapper from, I'm not even going to tell you which one, but I had this dude, and he was just so dry on the phone. I was like, I talked to him for 5 minutes, and I was like, all right, cool. But,
That's it.
and that was for like, so the good thing when I was working for the Metro, which was cool, this is the early start of Killer Boombox, I would talk to somebody like a Questlove for an hour and a half, and I would, you know, the Metro pieces, as you guys know, they're real short.
Yeah, they're short. Yeah.
400, 500 words at the most. So I give them their 500 words, and I go take 1,500, 2,000 and put it on my website. So I had, like, you know, I had full-length interviews with Busta Rhymes, Trey Songz, like, just a bunch of different people, and it was all from during that time, and now that helped us grow because now people were recognizing this, understand. Like I met a bunch of publicists through that, so now that we're coming back with Killer Boombox, they're on board and they rock with us now.
Who you looking to have an interview with now?
You know, whoever's got a good story to tell. You know what I mean? So I'm not particularly like.
You don't have like a specific artist.
I have, you know, I do. You know, okay. So my dream artist, or who I would want to sit and have a conversation with, probably would be Jay.
Okay.
I want to talk.
When you make that happen, let me know.
Listen, you're gonna be there.
I'm ready.
You're gonna be there. You can show who's Shirley's gonna be here too. Come on. No, so let me stop. I'm just playing. Yo, he is so tight.
She's with the Ciroc.
Oh, man, I'm just playing. But I'm serious about you coming. So in terms of my like dream artist to have a conversation with, it'd probably be like current artists right now that I want to talk to. I would love to talk to Janelle Monáe. I think she's super interesting.
Yeah.
Makes great music.
Her latest album, right?
Her latest album is incredible. I talked to Kendrick already. I interviewed him like right before before they announced the Drake deal.
Okay.
It was like before his first album, and I asked him, like, "Come on, man, the rumors is going around that you're going with Drake." He's like, "I can say it off the record, but yeah, I'm going." I'm like, "Okay, cool." I couldn't write it, but I at least knew for myself.
Yeah, for yourself.
But in terms of my dream interviews, it probably would be Jay-Z. And it's funny. I actually got kind of close to, like, I got a piece or a step toward that because I interviewed Emory Jones, his best friend Emory Jones, and Kareem Biggs Burke, his co-founder of Rockefeller. So when they put out the Reasonable Doubt,
that whole collection. Recently.
So they when they did that, the one of the cities that they went to was here in Boston.
Okay.
Was I was about to say Bodega. It was Concepts.
Yeah. How was that conversation?
Oh, it was dope, man. I had those dudes. It's funny
Emory knows
because
his stuff too, man.
and to be in this position that they're in, it shows you the example of people who are really about the life that they're involved with. And I mean in terms of who are really doing business. When you're comfortable in your skin, you're able to have those conversations. So there's none of that posturing and none of that. Yo, we did that. No, we just sit there and it was two. And I honestly just had a conversation with two really skilled businessmen who took their lives and just flipped them in. Now, just think about this. They knew each other as teenagers.
Right.
Jay-Z and Jay-Z and Emory, they all met when they were teenagers, and now they are in charge of one of the biggest rosters in sports, one of the biggest rosters in music, and his best friend is one of the greatest rappers of all time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, just think, and he was gone for like what 10 years.
Yeah,
right.
You imagine you in jail for 10 years, and you just like, yo, my man is the man. Yeah. He's not just successful. He ain't get a couple of hits.
Exactly.
No, he's the guy.
And then the thing that I love about the story too is like him coming out. When he came out, he kind of just went in, and it wasn't like, okay, you just come in, let's learn the ropes and everything. Jay was like, hey, where do you fit in? Where do you see him? And hit the ground running. And I love that. I was like,
well, they really grew together.
Yeah. and it's funny because a lot of people think, oh, he just got put on because he was his friend or whatever.
No, that is
talented.
No, he's actually doing
find your
work. Like
field,
those
find your
relationships with Puma and all those different things. That's all come that everything. Every time you see that paper plane hat,
that
that's
whole
him.
brand, that's Emery right there.
And I think too with the thing with that, it's basically finding what you love. And once you find what you love, you're gonna work harder and do it twice as hard versus somebody saying, "Okay, I'm just gonna put you in position just to put you in that position."
Exactly.
You don't care about it, and
it's not
feel
a win-win. It's not a win for either of you. If I give you a job just because I want to give you a job,
all right.
You're gonna go through the motions. If you're not passionate about it, you're gonna screw it up.
Well, that's the key word right there is the passion, because passion's not
exactly.
something that's taught. It's embedded in who you are as a person. That's what gets you up. That's what gets you going. So even if you're working, work doesn't feel like work. It's something
I think the friendship plays a part also because they know each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Right.
Because even if you could have said like, "Oh, I want to do this," Jay ain't stupid. He's gonna be like, "Maybe you should try this one instead." You know what I mean? Like, they didn't get to where they're at by accident.
Yeah.
But G, talk to us a little. So from your work as a journalist and these interviews, you've spoken clearly to a number of celebrities, right? Mm-hmm. And so I know a lot of people often think like there's like propaganda, manipulation, and information. Like we talk on our show sometimes, and we're just like, oh, Kanye's doing this because it's increasing his ratings, or like Cardi B and Nicki, it's for ratings, right? It's like to manipulate the people. Do you feel like celebrities in your work are manipulated and targeted to increase like reads and views and things like that?
I think that it's kind of both sides of it. So I think there's a switch in the way that people get information. So if the model is I have to have a certain level of traffic on my website, I'm going to figure out what to say to make you click.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So if that's kind of where my success is at, I'm gonna always look for the wild thing. I'm gonna find those over the board. I'm gonna get somebody to get me pictures of you coming out of your ex-girlfriend's house or so. You know what I mean? I'm all types of crazy stuff like that. If that's my business model, for me, I don't necessarily think you got it. You don't have to do that. I also think that we live in an era where there's a constant 24-hour news cycle. There's always something going on. So people are trying to figure out ways to stay in the front of people's minds.
Yes.
Because they know that the attention
can be lost quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And the attention is where you take the attention and drive it towards your music, and that's where you keep your money going on. Mm-hmm. You think about it, years ago, you could put out an album, your album would sell a bajillion copies, then you go on 2 tours, you do your North American tour, and you go do your European tour, and then you go home. You sit home for another 6 months, or another year or something like that. You can't do that anymore.
Not at all.
Those days are over. You cannot do that. You're constantly doing stuff to do that, and I think that we live in that social media age where you're trying to constantly figure out ways to keep people's attention, and that's why you look at somebody like a Tekashi 6ix9ine. A lot of what he's doing is he's of this generation. He knows that he has to keep people's attention, so he's figuring out the ways to keep people's attention.
What do you think of Tekashi 6ix9ine?
I mean, it's funny.
Music-wise,
he reminds me a little bit of Onyx in that gravelly voice. Like so if you're familiar with him, like he has
that X when he was first coming out. That
exactly.
movement.
He has that rawness,
gutter,
and it's a little bit different than what you've been hearing in terms of like the real trap heavy stuff. So it's kind of a different style. So I actually like that part of it. The rest of the shenanigans I'm not a big fan of, but I also know that he's not doing that for me. You know what I mean? He's doing that for he's doing that for his
extras that keeps him current.
Exactly.
Because from when you listen to his music, I actually was like, you know what? Let me listen. Let me see what he's about. It actually was not bad. It was not bad. I listened to the album and I was like, okay, I like a few tracks on there. And I never probably thought I would have liked anything that he recorded, but some of the stuff he has is actually good music. And I'm like, okay, yeah, he's not the biggest lyricist. I'm not going to listen to him for lyrics for that. So I understand where he's coming from with that. So yeah, it's definitely good.
Yeah, you get different energy from different artists at different times.
Exactly.
What do you think of the state of music nowadays? Because of how people need everything on constant going flow, and you got the Tekashi 6ix9ine, the Lil Uzi Verts, Lil Yachty's.
I'm actually pretty optimistic about the state of music, and I think the reason I am is because I understand that there's this wide array of music that you can get to. So before, and I hear people complain like music horrible. It's not horrible. You just got to go find